Tessy Martin had always believed in love. Not the shallow, fleeting kind, but the deep, soul-consuming love that left you breathless and transformed your world. Growing up in London, she had spent her teenage years immersed in romance novels, envisioning a love story worthy of the city's charm. The kind of story where two strangers met by chance, fell for each other against all odds, and built a life that felt like a dream. She never imagined her love story would turn into a nightmare. It all started on a rainy afternoon in Soho. The city was bustling despite the drizzle, people moving in and out of cafes and shops with hurried steps, shielding themselves with umbrellas. Tessy, however, had no sense of urgency. She loved the rain, the way it made London feel more intimate, as if the entire city belonged only to those who truly appreciated its beauty. She ducked into a small, independent bookshop on Dean Street, shaking the dampness from her coat. The scent of old pages and freshly brewed coffee from the store's small cafe filled the air. She walked along the aisles, her fingers trailing over the spines of books, searching for something to lose herself in. Then she saw it, a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Just as she reached for it, another hand did too. Their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. She looked up, ready to apologize, but the words caught in her throat when she met his gaze. The man standing before her was striking, tall, with sharp cheekbones, unruly dark hair, and piercing blue eyes that held an amused glint. He had an easy confidence about him, the kind that made him instantly magnetic. "Looks like we have the same taste," he said, a smile playing at his lips. Tessy chuckled, shaking her head. "Or you just have good taste in books." "Touché," he replied smoothly, tilting his head as if assessing her. "Jane Austen fan?" "Hopeless romantic," she admitted. He grinned. "Then I suppose I should let you have it." She raised an eyebrow. "And if I insist you take it instead? Then I'd say you're even more intriguing than I thought." There was something about him, something effortless yet compelling. He didn't just speak, he charmed. Before she knew it, they were sitting in the corner of the bookshop cafe, their conversation flowing as naturally as if they had known each other for years. His name was Paul Davidson. He was an entrepreneur, he told her, dabbling in different ventures, always looking for the next opportunity. He spoke about travel, about business, about his love for literature. He was witty, engaging, and Tessy found herself captivated. She hadn't meant to give him her number that day, but when she walked out of the bookshop, heart fluttering and a smile playing at her lips, she knew her story had begun. Their first date was at a cozy restaurant in Notting Hill. The dim candlelight cast a golden hue over the room, and the sound of soft jazz hummed in the background, his presence effortlessly commanding. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes," he admitted, swirling the wine in his glass. "Why not?" Tessy asked, arching an eyebrow. He smirked. "You strike me as someone who doesn't fall easily." She tilted her head, considering his words. "I don't. But something about you makes me want to." The confession surprised even herself, but it was the truth. Paul leaned in, resting his elbows on the table. "I'm glad." From that night on, they were inseparable. Paul took her on adventures, spontaneous weekend getaways, late-night drives through the empty streets of London, hidden speakeasies where time seemed to stand still. He was full of surprises, always making her feel like the main character in a grand romance novel. He never spoke much about his past, and Tessy never pushed. She convinced herself that love was about trust, that some things were better left to mystery. As much as she loved Paul, something about him didn't add up. For one, he always had cash, never cards. Even in upscale restaurants, he pulled out crisp banknotes instead of tapping a card like everyone else. He rarely spoke about work, brushing off questions with vague answers. And then there were the disappearances. Some nights, he would cancel plans last minute, claiming business emergencies. Other times, he would leave the country without notice, only sending cryptic messages. "I'll explain soon. Miss you." Tessy tried to ignore the unease that crept in. She loved him. That was enough, wasn't it? The night everything changed, Paul invited her over to his flat in Notting Hill. It was a lavish apartment, minimalist yet luxurious, with expensive art adorning the walls and a view that stretched over the city. He had cooked dinner, something rare for him. Candles flickered on the table, and a bottle of wine stood open. As they ate, Paul reached into his pocket. "I have something for you," he said. Tessy's heart pounded. Was this it? Was he finally going to propose? Then the front door burst open. Police stormed in, their shouts echoing through the apartment. "Paul Davidson, you are under arrest for grand larceny, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Tessy's world spun. She watched, frozen, as officers slammed Paul against the wall, cuffing him. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered, voice shaking. Paul didn't struggle. He didn't even look surprised. Instead, he turned to her and uttered two chilling words. "Tessy, run." Her blood turned to ice. Then, a second officer turned toward her. "Teresa Martin, you're coming with us." Her stomach dropped. "What? I don't understand." The officer pulled out a folder. Inside were bank statements, forged documents, offshore accounts. All under her name. Her fingerprints were on files she had never seen. Paul had done more than steal. He had set her up. She wasn't just his lover. She was his scapegoat. As the handcuffs locked around her wrists, Tessy realized the truth. The love of her life had never been real. And now she was paying the price.